Christmas. Where's our logo? Let's transition here. Give me a logo. There it is. Unveiling Christmas, discovering the God of the Nativity. And we began last week by saying that names matter, right? Like names reveal certain things about us that are really, really important. I thought about my own life, and this would be true of you. I thought about like what are all the different names that I'm called, at least those that I'm willing to admit on stage, or that people will say to my face. Here's the ones that people say to my face. I don't know what they say behind my back. But I've heard all of these names used to describe me recently. Maybe you've used some of them. I hope you haven't used all of them. Eric, Babe. That's that girl over there. Dad, Daddy, Papa, Puppy, Son, Sir, Buddy, Bro, Coach, Pastor, Friend, Rust, Stud. Well, I added that one to the list. I haven't. But if you want to, you could. Yeah, all of those are names that describe me. And there's maybe other names that you use to describe me. What's funny is I'm only one me, right? There's only one me. I'm here. This is one guy. And yet all of those names are used to describe me because they all describe a certain aspect of who I am, right? There's certain names that you can use that other people can't, or in certain contexts are appropriate. Well, the same exact thing is true of God. When we open the Bible, we discover that God is described or is called dozens of different names. One God, but understood in so many different ways because each of those names reveal either, number one, a certain aspect of his character, or number two, they give us insight into what someone was going through at a certain season when they wrote that name, right? They were going through a difficult time or some aspect of God's character really rose to the top. And so in our series, we are journeying towards Christmas with a desire to understand some of these names of God. We'll look at a handful of them together this December. And the hope is that we arrive at Christmas with a better understanding of the God who comes to us on Christmas through Jesus and how he wants to make himself known to us. The series is called, as you saw, Unveiling Christmas. We had another title for the series, but we discovered that there's a movie coming out this year at Christmas that had the same title that we were going to use, and so we're like, oh, that's going to be confusing. So we had to change it, and we were struggling to come up with a name. So we did what everybody does nowadays when they're stumped. We went to ChatGPT to see if ChatGPT could help us come up with a title. And so I just asked ChatGPT, like, what are some fun names that will be relevant to people of all ages? And you want to see the options we didn't go with? These are legit. They gave us 10. I cut 3 of them because they weren't even worth repeating. But here's 7 names that we didn't go with for the series. Number 1 was God Almighty and the Jingle Bell Parade. We're not that kind of church. Number 2, Ho Ho Holy Names, God's Christmas Identity Crisis. Yeah. Number 3, You'll Be Surprised, God's Holiday. Do you get it? You get it. Okay. Number 4, they get better. I think the Claus Connection, Santa, Rudolph, and God's Christmas labels. That is awful. I don't even know what that means. Number 5 is my favorite, Slaying It with Titles. Oh, that's creative. God's Aliases in December. That's a really, really good one. Reindeer, Elves, and Elohim, God's Yuletide nicknames. I don't think ChatGPT knows Jesus personally. Number 7, Laughing All the Noel, God's comedic Christmas titles. Those just didn't do it for us, and so we went with Unveiling Christmas, Discovering the God of the Nativity. Last week, we kicked off by looking at the very opening verse of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning, God. And we were introduced to the first name God that's used in the Bible to describe God, the name Elohim. And we talked about this name that describes God, and you know, he existed before creation. What's interesting, I didn't talk about this last week as much, but it helps today to understand this. What's interesting about the name Elohim, every ancient religion had an Elohim. The word Elohim is this the name God? So you might, like even the word God today means more than just the God of the Bible. You have these small G gods that can describe all kinds of things. That was the same of the word Elohim. Every religion had an Elohim. But part of what God was doing by revealing himself as Elohim, he's saying, I am a God that is unlike any other God. There's all kinds of gods out there, but there's something unique about me. And part of what's unique about God was not just what we talked about last week, which was how he created the heavens and the earth out of nothing. But part of what he was saying is, what makes me unique is what I do. And today we're going to unveil another aspect of what God does, because a huge part of who God is what God does and how he functions in our world. So if you have a Bible, turn to Exodus chapter 3, and we're going to read the story about a man named Moses today. It may not seem like a Christmas story. It's not really a Christmas story, but it introduces us to the God who comes at Christmas. So this will be a lot of fun. Let's go to chapter 3, verse 1, and we'll set it up here. It says, one day, Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. So a lot happening in this verse. Let me give you some context so we fully understand the weight of what's happening right here. Up at this point, at this time in history, the people of Israel had been enslaved in Egypt for about 400 years. They had grown from kind of a large family to a massive group of people. They weren't a nation yet because they weren't free. They didn't have their own sort of identity as a group of people in that regard. But they were a mass group of people, and they got so big that Pharaoh, the leader of the Egyptians, realized, wow, these people have expanded. Their numbers are so great. If they realized how many of them there are, they could probably resist us, throw a little resistance out, and probably beat us. And so he decided they needed to thin the numbers of Israelites out. And so Pharaoh, being an evil man, put out an edict that the midwives, as they helped the Israelite women deliver babies, they were to kill all of the baby boys that were born. That's brutal. And so that began to happen. However, there were some midwives that refused to do it. And they couldn't say that, so they would just lie and say, oh, we got there too late, and these Israelite women, they're strong. They have babies quick, and we missed our window. But they were trying to protect life. Well, one of the baby boys that was born to an Israelite mom was named Moses. And so Moses survived this massacre that was happening. And in order to hide him sometimes during the day, they had fashioned a little basket, and they would take this basket, they put him in the basket, and take him down to the reeds on the shore of the Nile River, and they would hide him there in this basket until the threat of people visiting the home or somebody was checking on things was gone. Then they would go get him and they would care for his needs. Well, at one point, he was down in the basket in these reeds, and Pharaoh's daughter, the Pharaoh of Egypt, his daughter found Moses. And she'd always desired to be a mother, and assuming that the baby had been abandoned, she decided, well, I'll raise him as mine. And so she takes Moses to Pharaoh's palace. So now Moses is being raised a prince of Egypt in Pharaoh's palace itself. He grows into young adulthood, and through a series of unfortunate events, you can read all about this, by the way, in Exodus chapter 1 and 2, he finds himself having to flee Egypt to save his life. He's exiled away from his country, and he runs and to save his life. And he runs, and eventually on the run, he meets a woman. Sounds like a nice movie, like the story of a movie. He meets a girl, they get married, and he starts working, as we see here, for his father-in-law. Now, any father-in-laws in the room? Anybody? I'm a father-in-law. Any father? I'm sure you're all great father-in-laws. Like I'm trying to be a good father-in-law. It's rough working for your father-in-law. Can we disagree? Some of us have done that before. I worked for my father-in-law for a while. It was rough. Like I love him to death. Bob was a great guy, but it's not easy working for your father-in-law. I imagine there was the same probably for Moses in this situation. So he's out in the desert, and this has been the experience of his life so far. The people of Israel are still enslaved, and he finds himself where? Far in the wilderness. And I think that phrase, far in the wilderness, says everything about the state of mind and emotional space that Moses was in. I mean, he's like out there, and he's trying to figure out, like, who am I? I used to have a country, and now I'm on my own, I'm working for my father-in-law, and I'm just out here. And I imagine he was having a bit of an identity crisis, like, God, what are you doing? Who am I? Why am I here? What's my life even for? Like, what's my purpose? And I just have a sneaking suspicion that some of us can relate to that. I bet you have, at some point in your life, maybe even now, had your far in the wilderness experience where you're kind of wondering, God, what is going on? I thought my life was going to go one way. It took a massive turn. That didn't work out, and I've adjusted, and now I'm out here just caring for a bunch of sheep. I don't know what's going on. What are you doing in this world? What are you doing in me? Where do I belong? And it's into that moment, I think it was that kind of a headspace that the verses we're about to read play out. Let's go to verse 2. It says, there, out in the wilderness, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. This is amazing, Moses said to himself. Why isn't that bush burning up? I must go see it. I love that. When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush. Moses, Moses, here I am, Moses replied. Do not come any closer, the Lord warned. Take off your sandals, for you're standing on holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. And I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering. I love this verse. Like, I think this is one of the most beautiful verses we read about God in the Bible, definitely in the Old Testament. Because God in this verse reveals himself to be a God who sees our oppression, who hears our cries of distress, and is who is aware of our suffering. Like, he wants us to know this about himself. He's telling you today, I see you, I hear you, and I am aware. Like, in stark contrast, again, the Elohim of all the other religions versus the Elohim of the Bible revealed here. He's saying, I, unlike every other God that might be out there, small g God, I'm not distant and detached from the human experience. No, I'm intimately involved. I'm keeping an eye on you. I have an ear leaning towards you, and I have a heart of compassion for you. I understand, and I see, and I hear you. How profound. You have undoubtedly in your life been through difficult seasons. Maybe you find yourself in one right now. I thought about my own life, and I thought about 2 years ago, I went through a difficult season, kind of a time of like emotional suffering and relational suffering. And it was during that season for me where I felt misunderstood by some people. I felt maybe like wrongly judged. My motives are being questioned. And if you know anything about me at all, that's like one of like the worst things possible for me. If like my heart or my intentions aren't understood fully and like there's this break in relationship, it just kills me inside. And I'm going through this season and I remember having moments of like, God, what are you doing? Like, why am I going through this? Can't you just stop that? Can't you just fix it? Because you're God, right? You just snap your fingers and you could fix it. And I never heard like an audible voice where God said, Eric, take off your shoes. You're standing on holy ground. None of that kind of moment. But I remember having this strong sense of what I already knew to be true and God just confirming it for me in a moment of just kind of silence and stillness where he just said to me, Eric, I hear your prayer. I can't just fix this because people are people. Like, any people here ever done like stupid before? Anybody ever done stupid? Yeah, like, people just do stupid and like we want God, like, God, just like, would you just take them out? Like, I don't mean like kill them. That sounds horrible. But like, would you just like remove the issue? And he's like, I mean, I could, but I can't. Like people make their choice, Eric. But I see your suffering. I hear your cries of distress. And I'm aware of what you're going through. And honestly, for me, like that in that moment was enough. That I am loved and known by a God who sees me, who hears me, and is aware of what I'm going through. That's the kind of God he is. And from that place, he then acts and he moves. He goes on and says, so in light of the fact that I have seen, heard, and am aware, I have come down to rescue them from the powers of the Egyptians and to lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. God says, I'm about to rescue my people. And yet, newsflash, there's more going on than just God rescuing people. Like at the end of the day, God's not only involved in rescuing, like he's doing something else that's bigger and that is going to actually resonate and just kind of ripple throughout history. In order to understand what it is, we have to go to a different part of the Bible, to the book of Isaiah, chapter 63. This is written 800 or so years after this story with Moses. So 800 years go by. The people of Israel have been freed from captivity in Egypt, and yet they continued to flail and wander and then come back to God, and they wandered and they came back to God. They were on and off, hot and cold, in and out. They just struggled to be faithful. And during a particular season, this prophet rises up named Isaiah, and he speaks on behalf of the people, and he's reminding them about what God has done in the past. Look what he says in chapter 63, verse 11. He says, then they remembered, speaking of the people of Israel, the days of old when Moses led his people out of Egypt. They cried out, where is the one who brought Israel through the sea with Moses as their shepherd? Where is the one who sent his Holy Spirit to be among his people? Where is the one whose power was displayed when Moses lifted up his hand? The one who divided the sea before them, making himself, God, famous forever. And then in verse 14, he says, you led your people, Lord, and gained a magnificent reputation. It wasn't the reputation of the people of Israel that would resound throughout history because of the Exodus. It was the reputation of the God who would lead his people. And so part of what he's trying to help Moses understand is, Moses, yeah, I'm about to rescue my people because I see them, I hear them, and I'm aware, and I care. I'm going to rescue them. I'm going to use you in the process, which you're about to find out. But at the end of the day, this isn't about the people of Israel, and it's not about you. I am gaining for myself a magnificent reputation. I am distinguishing myself from every other God that ever has been or ever will be. There's something different about me. And a huge part of that is not just who I am, but it's how I express myself. It's what I do in the lives of my people. He says then to Moses, back to Exodus, he says, Moses, now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. Would you have a lump in your throat if you were Moses at that moment? Like, they want to kill me back there. No, you must lead my people, Israel, out of Egypt. I love his response. But Moses protested to God, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? Like, just my translation of what he's saying here is, God, I think you have the wrong person. You showed up at the wrong bush, the wrong little plot of land with the wrong shepherd. I am a nobody, God. I cannot possibly go back to Egypt and do what you're asking me to do. Let's think about it. The Egyptians hate me because I was born an Israelite. The Israelites hate me because I was raised an Egyptian. I don't have people. I have no voice. I have no home. Like, I'm talking to a bush. This is the extent of my relational connections at this moment. Right? Like, I am not the person for the job. He goes on later to have a lot more pushback as well. But he's just like, God, who am I? And I love Moses, and you can kind of say, bless his heart, right? Because it's like, who am I? It sounds like a fair question. I think a question that you and I would ask, but it's the wrong question, isn't it? Because God has already said to Moses, I have seen the oppression. I have heard the cries of my people. I am aware of their suffering. Like, I'm going to step in and rescue. And yet Moses somehow takes all those I statements God makes, and he comes back to, yeah, but what about me? Like, how are you going to use me? What's my role in this? And for some reason, he puts himself back in the front of the conversation. And I love how God responds. God doesn't respond like, oh no, Moses, you got this. Let me build you up a little bit. Let me encourage you. Here's a book to read. Here, practice some box breathing when you get stressed out and overwhelmed. None of that. Look what he says to him. He says, I'll tell you why. I'll be with you. That's God's answer to the who am I question. Moses says, who am I? And God says, I will be with you. Never even answers the question. Right? It's not about who you are, Moses. It's about who I am. It's about who is with you. Because if I am with you, you have everything that you need. Moses starts to get it a little bit. It takes him a while, but then he asks a more important question in verse 13. He says, Moses protested, if I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? Like, I'm willing to do this, God. If I need to go, I'll consider it. But you and I need to be on a first name basis. I don't want to show up with like, yeah, I talked to this bush. They're going to be like, what? Like, I need a name. Like, if you'll just give me your name, then I can come to the people of Israel and they'll at least have some confidence in me. And God, in his grace, decides, okay, I'll tell you my name. And so God replied to Moses, all right, here it is. I am. And so Moses is like, I'm ready. I don't know if he had like a piece of paper, well, maybe like a stone and a chisel. And he's like, all right, God, give me your name. I'm going to write it down. I am. Moses is like, I am who? God goes, exactly. That's my middle name. I am who I am. That's the name he gives. Say this to the people of Israel. I am has sent me to you. This phrase, I am, in Hebrew, it comes from the Hebrew word hayah. Could you say hayah with me? Hayah. Sounds like you're breaking bricks or something, right? Hayah. Hayah is it's a verb, and it simply means to be. The word hayah, it's like, it communicates like existence, life, to be. It's kind of a hard word to even describe. It just is. It's just hayah. And this word hayah is where we get the what's the word I want to say? The proper name. The proper name of God, Yahweh, or sometimes it's known as Jehovah. This name of God, Yahweh, reveals God to be personal. I see you. I hear you. I'm aware. A God who is unchanging. He was and is and is to come. And a God who is self-existent, not dependent upon anything. It's a name that was so sacred to the Jewish people. They were afraid to say it. They would find other ways to say it. They would not even write it down. If they were to write the name Yahweh, they would leave out the vowels. They would spell it YHWH because they didn't want to use it wrong. Matter of fact, in your Bible, if you read the Bible and you see the word Lord in all caps, Lord, in all caps, that would be the Jewish name Yahweh. So it's even translated not as Yahweh in most of our Bibles, although it is occasionally. Normally it comes through as Lord. Okay? This is God's name, he says. I am who I am. And then he says in verse 15, this is my eternal name, like my forever name, my name to remember for all generations. We think of names as nouns, right? Like that's how we process names. God reveals himself. God gives us his name, and he says, my name's actually a verb. I mean, think about that. God's name is a verb. To be. I am. I am who I am. I will be what I will be. It's Revelation chapter 1, verse 8. You know, when it says of God, I am the one who is, who was, and is to come. This is my name that I'll always be known by, that I am what I am, that part of who I am is just what I have done and my work through history, what I've done in the past, and what I'll continue to do in the future. God says, my name is I am. Here's the truth about this story. This is so good for us to get our heads around, because I think this is where life meets for you and I. There was not a single person alive that could lead the people of Israel out of slavery in Egypt. Like, it wasn't like God chose Moses because Moses was the best candidate. God didn't post the job on LinkedIn and, leader of Exodus, apply here. And Moses is like, I think I can do this. And then he got interviewed by a burning bush out in the middle of the desert and he passed. And so there was no one that could pass the test, right? It was not about that whatsoever. That's why the who am I question was irrelevant. Didn't matter who you were, Moses. Matter of fact, the question, who am I, is irrelevant until you and I understand who God is. And so I'll say it to you this way, just this might be memorable for you. His name is I am. My name is I am not. How's that for some perspective? Everybody say, I am not. I'm not in charge. I'm not your solution. I'm not the answer. I'm not what the world needs. I'm not what you're looking for. I'm not your hope and your future. Whatever it is, the answer is that I am not. See, I think you and I have the same tendency that Moses has, which is we come to God with this thought in the back of our mind that it's about what we bring to the table. And let me just commend you. If you have a desire to do something or be something great for God, I think that's wonderful. I would hope and pray that every one of us have that desire. Like, God, I want to do something for you that matters, that transcends me. That is incredible. Don't lose that. And let us not forget that at the end of the day, it's not about what we bring. It's not like God's like, yeah, Eric, I could use you if you just bring a little bit more. Give me a little more. If you just be something that you're not, then maybe I could. It's ultimately not about me becoming something that God needs me to be, because I'm not. And so I think God, through this story, would say to Moses the same thing, or say to us the same thing he said to Moses, which is, Moses, let me tell you who you are. I love you, buddy, but here's the truth. You are not. But I am. Moses, you never can be. That's okay, because I am. And Moses seemed to get to this place. It took him a while. I think you have to read a couple more chapters before he gets there. But here's where I think you and I need to get to. We need to get to this place right here. I am not. We own that. I am not, but I know I am. Who are you? I'm not. But what's most important about me is I know I am. See, every single one of us here, doesn't matter how old we are, how much we've gone to church in our lives, what our current bias towards Jesus is or not. Every one of us are on the level playing field here. We are all affected by this issue called sin. Every one of us are plagued by sin. Sin is this tendency in us to go our own way, to do our own thing, and to break away from that which God says is right, holy, and good. That meets his standard, and we do our own thing. And that sin becomes an issue for us with God that we can't solve ourselves. What we discover is, some of us have learned this, some of us are still in the process. We discover this, that we need someone to do something for us. Or I could say it this way, we need someone to be something for us that we cannot be for ourselves. That's our only solution. And God, being personally involved seeing, hearing, and being aware, said, you know what, I'm going to do something for my creation. And so that's why on Christmas, God came to earth through Jesus. And by Jesus being born on Christmas, what God was announcing to the world is he was saying to every one of us, I know you're not, and you'll never be. But that's okay because I am. I am here. I'm with you. I am for you. I'm your solution. I'm your salvation. I am your forgiveness. I am your hope and your future. I am your strength. I am love. I am everything that you need. I am today. I was, and I am to come. This is who I am. And so today you might find yourself journeying through December right now with a heavy heart. Don't know what life's throwing your way or what you're going through. But I hope today that you've been reminded that God sees you. He hears you. He's aware of your suffering. And it's not a matter of you trying to fix it yourself or becoming something that, rises above that circumstance. He's simply saying to you, you can't be, but will you let me be that for you? The great I am? The one who sees and cares and who's come to do for you what you cannot do for yourself. May that just encourage you. Maybe we need to be reminded, as Moses was this Christmas, that it's not about us. That when we try to get what we need or be what we think we need to be ourselves, or when we try to extract from each other that which we're looking for, it's a lose-lose situation. Instead, God says, stop looking this way or in the mirror. Would you look to me? Maybe we could lift our eyes this Christmas to the great I am who came to us to reveal the fullness of who he is and embrace the gift of life, love, and presence that we desperately need. I want to pray that over us. If you would just close your eyes for a moment. And maybe as I pray, you can just sort of add your, yeah, that's right, God, that's for me, to this prayer. Heavenly Father, I'm reminded already of just baptism. We celebrated with 9 or 10 people today who took this water and allowed it to become like a grave where the old life that they once lived was left underneath the water, and this new resurrected emerging life came. It's a sign, God, that you do something for us that we could never do for ourselves. I pray that we would be reminded of that today, that part of who you are is directly connected to that which you do. It's what you did, and it's what you continue to do today. Why? Because you are I am. You just are. To be. You exist. You always have. You always will. And thank you for being so big and yet seeing us in our pain, our suffering, our confusion, and doing something about it. And I just pray that for anybody today whose eyes are stuck on either themselves, for any of us whose eyes are stuck on maybe someone else and trying to get something from them that we think we need, or maybe our eyes are stuck on a situation that we find ourselves in, that we would lift them this Christmas and that we would see you, God, revealed in your Son Jesus, a Jesus who came to be for us what we desperately needed, who came as the great I am. And in him we live, we move, we exist, we find everything that we need. May that reality be front and center for each of us this Christmas. Jesus, thank you for loving us enough to come, not just to be born, but to die and to resurrect again so that we could experience new life. Thank you that you are nothing more than an invitation, a turn of the heart, like a bending of the knee in humility before you. And you extend new life and hope to each and every one of us. We're so grateful for that, Jesus. We thank you so much for loving us for who we are, not for what we do. And today we pray all of this in your strong, powerful, self-sufficient name, Jesus. Amen. Amen. 2 weeks from now, we've got a fun event. It's up here on the screen. It's called Jingle Jam, and it's a great experience for the entire family. It's on the 17th, starts at 4 o'clock. It's an opportunity for us to gather in this room. This room will be packed with families, not just from our church, but from all across our community, which we love. And we'll have an incredible family experience. And then afterwards, we go outside in the parking lot for carols. I'm almost done. Give me just a second. They're like, we're out of here. You're 4 minutes over, Rust. Russ, that's a good name to call me. And then we go outside in the parking lot and we have fun carols, Coco, just a great time out there. So mark your calendar, 4 o'clock on the 17th. All right. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Have a great week. We'll see you soon.